Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader podcast. This is Stephanie, and I'm here with Maren, and we are super excited because we have an amazing guest today. His name is Mark Silver, and he is a wonderful being who helps people literally do business differently and recover from the toxic memes that business is kind of being portrayed in this world today.
Yeah, the traditional way that we are taught to do business, it's because we live in it, we don't even realize how toxic it is sometimes. We feel it. And I think so much of so many of our issues, both personal and in our world, in our business, like it comes from living within this system that we don't even realize is so toxic.
Yeah, and it informs the way that we see ourselves in the world. And one of the things I really loved about Mark and our podcast that we're talking about is like literally that every act of business can be an act of love. And I don't think we really embody that or know how, even what that means. And so we start to unpack that with him. And what a great being. He comes from, fourth generation entrepreneur in his family, as well as his background as a paramedic, and he's a podcaster, and he's an author of some great books that he's got out there, and a spiritual healer and coach. He's bringing such a plethora of support and guidance. He's also practicing Sufi, so with a master's in divinity. So I think he's stretching from all different quadrants of what is possible, and then integrates the outer world and the inner world, which I so love. And to me, as a soulful leader, he really embodies that.
He does, and I think there are so many favorite parts of our conversation with him, and one of my favorite was just diving into. So the name of his book is Heart-Centered Business, and it's healing the toxic business culture so your small business can thrive. And we kind of unpacked what is the heart of a business. And when we start to think about it like that, it changes everything. And I won't spoil it for you because it was just such a delightful conversation. I think you guys will, Stephanie and I absolutely loved this conversation. And I know that you all will as well.
And for those of you who might be listening to this going, well, I don't have a business. So, don't click off, because, we all have the business of being here in this world, and that we all have gifts and strengths that we are meant to unfold and to share with the world. So look at, our business, your business, beyond the transactional corporate kind of meme that we know as business. We talk about that, and Mark really transcends that.
He does. Well, please, as usual, let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you on our Facebook page and on our LinkedIn page. Both of those are at The Soulful Leader, and we look forward to hearing your comments. Please enjoy our conversation with Mark Silver.
In a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Maren. And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay!
So we're very excited today to have our guest, Mark Silver, with us. And he is, as you know, from the intro, he's got a business called The Heart of Business. And I want to kind of get us kicked off with a question, kind of dive right into it, Mark, with tell me what it means to you, the heart of business.
So thank you. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And, it really has a very spiritual meaning. And from a Sufi perspective, everything that exists has a heart. And that is the expression that is the divine presence in it. And from a Sufi perspective, everything came from the oneness, and everything is an expression of the oneness. And when we talk about the human being, we have a heart, and that heart is our spiritual heart is our connection and expression of the divine through us. And everything that exists is a divine expression. So everything has a heart. And when we talk about a heart of business, we're saying that any business, any thing, any project has this existence that's that it is its own and that we can connect with it. So that's kind of like the more esoteric meaning. Um, Heart of business, in another sense, is really just being with the essence of it. I think that we get overwhelmed. A lot of people in business get overwhelmed. So many details, so many things to do, so many people, so many just coming at you. And when we can connect with the essence, when we can connect with the heart, can connect with the love, all of those distractions and overwhelm can melt away, and we can be really clear, like, what is it that we're up to? What is it that we need to be focused on? Where does our attention and our care need to be?
Yeah, that can create a lot of noise in the outer world, and we get very addicted to that. And that becomes our identity and our kind of our guiding or our guidance, rather than what I'm hearing you say is like, being able to really connect into that heart allows the outer dissonance to literally dissipate and fall away.
Yeah,
And we can be,
exactly.
yeah.
I love the analogy with the human body has a heart. So at a very practical level, right? So if the heart stops in our body, the body stops. And
Hmm.
I don't think that we think about that with our business. Business is all about the busyness of business instead of the heart. And like when I know for myself with my studio, when our heart, it's like thinking about it from that perspective. I look back and I realize that there was a point in time when the heart of our business started to like go downhill and have
Mm.
problems, and that's where like we found it back. We went through many cycles. There were times when were able to get it back, and then it dissipated again, and looking to be able to be present and look at it in the moment from that perspective, how powerful that is for changing your business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we've worked with, at this point, thousands of business owners over the last quarter of a century. And, one of the things that we consistently come back to is asking people to slow down and listen to the heart of the business, like do some listening. A lot of times people are only active with their business when they're trying to make the business do something and be productive with it, which, on one hand kind of makes sense. But the truth is that if we had a relationship, if when we have a relationship with a loved one, if the only time that we interacted with them was trying to get them to do something, that would be a really painful, toxic, dysfunctional relationship. Um, and I think that it's actually extremely practical and extremely efficient, as well as just really nourishing, to just slow down, just kind of be with your business and to listen. And there's a lot of different ways people talk about this, but to be able to pause and to be able to listen to what's actually in motion, to what actually has your attention, to what actually is asking for your attention. I think we're all familiar with the analogy of fighting fires in your business, running from one urgent thing to the other, but not really taking notice of what really needs to be cared for, you know? And I think that that's really at the heart of helping a business really thrive without hurting yourself or hurting anyone else associated with it.
I like what you said about a relationship. Like if you just ignored a relationship and then you wanted it to do something, it doesn't go very well. And it's like when I think of this heart or the soul of a business, to be able to ask that question of like, I might have an ego possibility of what I want to have happen, like goal setting and different things that we talk about, especially, when we think of, quarterly goals and yearly goals and things like that. We have this agenda that we want to have happen, and then we kind of force it and push it and try to make it happen without considering that the business has a heart and a soul, and what might it being the business want to have happen for us or for humanity or for something else, and having that collaborative conversation. And I think that's so
Yes.
important, and it's so, as far as I'm concerned, at least in my world, I don't really find that a lot of people think that way.
It's true, and we lead people through this kind of an exercise all the time. I mean, there's a lot of really practical things we attend to as well. Like there's, marketing and the structures, the systems and, team and all these things that do need, they need care and attention. And this deeper listening of like, what is it that the business is asking from me? And if it gets it, what does it want to give me? I mean, that's one of the ways we construct that. And people are often really surprised because they have it in their head like, oh, the business, I need to work really hard. I need to be pushing all the time. And what often people hear is like, oh, the business just needs some care, or it needs me to be more joyous, or it needs to be more playful. These are the kinds of messages I was just hearing recently from folks. And it's very surprising. People go, is that really true? And then they feel it, and then they lean into it. And then when they bring their playfulness to their business, suddenly things get a lot easier. Suddenly the relationships and the connections that they're making are much more effective. They lead places. A lot of times when we bring that kind of like, I've got to get it done, productive energy, that pushes people away. It doesn't feel good to be around very often.
It doesn't feel good to do that either as a business person. It's like, that's not my, like, I feel very salesy. I feel very pressure. And
Right.
that's not who I want to be in my business. And I know there's a certain requirement of that. And I know I need to sometimes have that mind shift around it. Instead of saying I'm like, selling, I'm actually serving. And that is a shift, isn't it? Of like looking at it from a different place. And
It is.
if you could stay, there's two questions I have for you. If you could say more about that, as well as like, I'm also really curious how you even came to this, like how that shift of like, because there's so much toxicity in the business world out there on how to do it, and that old push your way through it. And that's what Maren and I talk a lot about. It's like, there's another way, but I'm so curious about even how you got there.
Yeah. So, yeah, and we can come back around to like, how do you shift into that? That was something I was just talking about earlier today. But the how I got into it, actually, I grew up an activist, a punk in outside Washington, D.C., and hated business, hated what business was doing to the world. This is back in the 1980s, and I just really kind of kept that in my heart. I saw that over and over and over again. And yet at a certain point in my life, through the nonprofit world, through running a magazine, through these kinds of things, I learned something about marketing. I grew up in small business with my parents, business that was my grandfather's. And I saw people, friends of ours who were self-employed, doing really, really important, beautiful work, organic gardeners, people just trying to make a living. And they're like, how do I do this? And I knew more than I thought I did. And then we intersected with a Sufi teacher, and there was a 3-year school that talked about business healing. Specialty in business healing was one of the specialties offered. And I was like, what? Business healing? What does that even mean? Yeah. And it provided me an alternative to the kind of anger reaction based activism that was really burning me out. I'm not saying anything bad. Like we need that kind of activism, but for one person, for somebody to do only that for years and years is really exhausting. Um, and so as I learned about business healing, there was this intersection between the business know-how that I had had and that I continue to learn over years with these elements of spiritual healing, of connecting with love. And it began to merge in my heart. And I did the work, I got the training, I got my master's of divinity. I was faculty with the school. Um, uh, and it's been woven into the fabric of what we do at Heart of Business, where we don't there's an approach to spirituality in business that says go sit on the cushion or pick up your beads or do whatever and fill yourself up. This the gas tank analogy. And then you go do business the way that you have to do business because that's how business is done. And then when your tank is empty, you go fill up again. And that has never really worked. That's never felt right to me. And so in learning this and in seeing in my own heart kind of like the intersection between outer business practices and inner spiritual truths, I just saw that integrated. And that's what we've been teaching. It's like there's a way to do business. What we say, every act of business can be an act of love. And people really get to be in business. So, for instance, it sounds very esoteric. So, like one of the big things we teach around is marketing, because of course, for small businesses, that's a huge block and stumbling ground and need. And and so the basic teaching in marketing is like you've got to market to the pain, and you've got to push those pain buttons. And when people have the reaction, then you can offer them the solution. That's a very traumatic based way of selling. It's manipulative. It's gross. It's really painful. But if you try to do marketing just from like an aspirational place, people don't respond. And there's a deep spiritual teaching in the Sufi tradition that says that um, we really yearn to be known, that the heart
Mhm.
is yearns to be known, that the divine created the creation yearning to be known. And the creation came out of that desire to be known. And that's what we also carry in our hearts, this deep desire to be known. And so there are ways to talk about the struggle that people might have with whatever it is that you're offering, with compassion, with seeing them as a whole person, and with a deep trust that they have a way through that doesn't necessarily have to come from you. Like it doesn't like your solution can be one of the things on offer, but you can see people and just say, I see that you're struggling with whatever, like an example with a chiropractor. If you don't fix your back, you'll never pick up your child again. You'll never live a full life. You better come get fixed. It's like it just feels gross. Or you can say, like, yeah, back pain, chronic back pain can be debilitating and it can keep you from things that you really love. And thankfully, the body can heal. In most cases, it can heal. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's a lot depending. And what we offer is something that works for a wide variety of people. And if you think that you need it, it's like you can just bring a different tone
Yeah.
where you can really witness the struggle, where people feel witnessed, but they don't feel pressured. They don't feel traumatized. They don't feel activated by it.
Yeah, I like
And a
that you're
big
not
impact.
having to re-traumatize somebody and then push them like then because that is the traditional way of doing it. It's like they don't use those words, and that's essentially what it is push the pain point. Well, you know what? That's re-traumatizing
It
somebody.
is. It
And
is.
then you put a time limit on and if you don't sign up today, you're going to lose out on this discount. So then you take that and you layer on top of it additional trauma of like the whole FOMO, fear of missing out. And it's like the yucky,
It is.
the business yucky.
We have a whole guide that I wrote called Don't Buy Now. And it was about how to spot manipulative sales tactics so you don't have to get taken in by them. And it's like, it's just, when people can see them, it's the difference between being at a carnival with all the bright lights at night, versus being there in the daylight and you can see the tricks. It's like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like you've taken the Wizard of Oz curtain and you've opened it and been like, see the wizard?
if anybody's offering you a time limit, but like if you sign up while we're on this call, don't ever do it. Do not ever. Just like
I know. How many
categorically no.
times have I done that? Like, how many times have I been on a call where someone has done that? And I'm like, oh, I have to do this because if I don't, I can feel the shame. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't, I'm going to miss out, like the fear of missing out. But also after, sometimes when I do that, then I'm like, ew, ick. I feel ick. Like, how do I get out of this now? Like, I'm
Right.
not engaged from my heart and my soul. I'm engaged from a place of fear.
Yes. Yes. And I can promise you that anybody who's using that kind of a tactic, they are benefiting from the fact that you're not able to take the time to regulate your own system and to look at it and to talk over with people that you trust, to get second opinions and to really do your research. Like it's don't ever, there's never a good reason to use that that's it's one of the manipulative tactics, and
I like what
don't
you
ever do
just
it.
said about the emotional regulation, because I think that's a real key thing. And I've talked to some of my clients about that. And I know some people don't like, well, what is emotional regulation? Like, what even is that? And why is that necessary now? Why, if we don't have emotional regulation, what are the issues that come up with that? And I think that's where, and I'd love for you to talk about that a bit too, because I think that's also where the toxic
Yeah,
business culture comes in, is that they actually hijack that emotion.
right, especially in the sales conversation, but they do it on teams, they do it within companies and corporate cultures do that all the time. They take advantage, all this talk about like we're a family, and it's like, oh yeah, so and families are never dysfunctional and painful and traumatic, right? So anyway, um, so and you're not a family. Like businesses are not a family, and yeah. So emotional regulation. And I just want to say, I am not a therapist. I am not a trauma healer. I'm trauma informed. I've had to go through my own PTSD. Former career, I was a paramedic in the 911 system in the San Francisco Bay Area and Oakland, um, in Alameda County. And so I had to deal with that. And so I know about it, and I know a little bit about trauma healing, but it's not my specialty. So I'm talking about it as a layperson. But emotional regulation, um, when strong emotions come up, they they push us, like they if you're scared, you retract or you do whatever you do when you're scared. Some people, lash out, some people retreat, some people cling. Like there's all these different kinds of reaction cycles that we go into when certain emotions are large, and that doesn't have to be, it could be grief, it could be sadness, it could be anger, there could be, whenever those kinds of things are activated. I mean, in politics today, you can see how they're using emotional dysregulation to get people, get certain populations very angry, and then they're very reactive, and they're not really operating from a place of wisdom or connection or truth. And so it's okay. I mean, we have big emotions. It's not a bad thing. You just don't want to take action when you're in that state. You don't want to
Yeah.
make big decisions when you're in that state. A lot of times when I'm talking to a potential client who's considering hiring me, unless we have like a long association, they know me well. But if it's somebody that I don't know or they're new to me, I say, I don't expect you to make a decision while we're talking. In fact, it'll be important for us to hang up and for you to take some time away from me, because when you're in somebody's flow, it can be very affecting,
Mhm.
and we may like each other as people and have a good time talking, but is it a good decision to hire me? Maybe it is. I hope so. I'm looking forward, it seems like it would be good to work together, but you need to take some time away from me and check in with yourself, check in with people you trust, and make sure that it feels like a regulated and aligned
I
decision.
love that. I love that.
So, and I want to go back a second because I think that some of our listeners are business owners they don't do the manipulation from a place of realizing that it's a manipulation and
Right.
or from a like from a negative place. They do it because that's what they were trained to do. This is
Yes.
just business, best practices. Best marketing practices are fill in the blank, and they tend towards this. Put a time limit on it. I mean, we just went through, like all the season of sales
We're
where
thick in it.
we're
Yeah.
thick in it, right? And so there is this constant ongoing, this is the way that business is done. So I love that you gave that example for business, that there is another way if you are somebody who is doing that type of marketing and that's how you close sales. And you do feel the ick when you're the person who's doing it. It doesn't feel aligned for you. Know that there is another way. There are multiple other ways. And
That are still effective. You still end up with clients.
very,
You still end up getting paid. Here's the funny thing is that when someone with a good heart and good intentions takes on those kinds of strategies just because they don't know any better and that's what they were taught, it can almost be worse because someone who is intuitive or connected or whatever can read that this person has good intentions, that they're not trying to cheat me, but the strategy itself is manipulative. And so because they're not, the person isn't reading that the person selling has bad intentions. Oh wow, this person has good intentions, or it feels good, or we have a good connection and they feel, but because the strategy itself is doing the manipulation, it can really throw people off. And the result of that is that people still will feel icked even if someone has really good intentions.
Mhm.
And you get more cancellations, you get more returns, you get more unhappy customers. Um, I had this ick. My son joined a gym recently, started going with friends. He's taller than me now. He's going to be big. Anyway, he's teenagers. What are you going to do? So, and we had our card had to get canceled because debit card had to get canceled because of fraud, some kind of alert,
Mhm.
something. Of course, it happens all the time, right? You replace the card. This gym puts when the charge doesn't go through, doesn't let you know that the charge didn't go
Mhm.
through, and then they charge you a late fee and
hmm.
predatory. And I cannot tell you, like I didn't have positive or negative feelings about the gym. I had vaguely positive feelings about it because my son was going, he was enjoying it, and he was, like I'm like, that's great, and they're doing it. Now I'm yucked. I hate this place, and they'll I will never say a good thing about it, and it like these if we take on these tactics because they quote unquote work, they can do real damage to your business.
Yeah. And I think,
Mhm.
when going back to the beginning when we were talking about the heart of, right? It's what it is going back to what is the heart of our business? What is the intention behind it? What do we want to see happen for our business and for our clients? And I think most people have really good intentions for their clients and
Mhm.
have,
Yes.
it's like they just get swept off because I think a lot of small business owners like myself, when I started my studio, I owned a ballroom dance studio. And when I started it,
Have fun.
I knew very little about business. And then I dove in, as a professional dancer. I then backdoored it into business, right? And I did a lot of studying and and, when you're doing that, which I think most small businesses do that, they start
Yes.
off as people who are excellent at what they do. Then somebody's knocking on their door saying, well, would you teach me? Would you show me? Would you do that for me? Would you and so now all of a
Mm.
sudden you have a business
Right.
and you're like figuring it out as you go. And so you hear, you take the workshop and you do this and you do, and so you learn these business practices. You have good intentions, like you said, and you're learning. And what you're learning is traditional big business, which is kind of smarmy. And unfortunately, it gets passed down. It's like I really think of it like so much of, I'm a big gardener, and large agriculture got passed down to the small farmer. And it's done so much damage, and the small farmer doesn't need large agriculture, but it's just passed down. And the same kind of thing with business. I see it so often. We just adopt what is working on a large scale, not realizing we don't need to do it like that.
And it's not working on a large scale either. Like, it's
No,
accumulating money to very few people. But I think anyone who works in these large corporations, there's very few people that are happy,
I agree.
right? And there's not, and you know, I have so much to say about scale, but there's, like the only thing, this is a radical statement, and I don't know, I'm sure people would argue with me about this, but the only thing that I believe that large, at scale, global corp, like those kind of like large corporations, the only thing they're really efficient at is concentrating money into the hands of very few people.
Mm.
There's not like there's way more efficiency and care and just success that can be had at a much smaller scale. And
I love that because
I'm totally cheering over here too.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, all three of us work with the solopreneur to small business. And there's a group, and they say that their slogan is kind of business as a force for good. And I do believe that is a grassroots small business. Like, we can do that in our own small businesses. We can do that when there's less than 50 people, that we can, like, because there's that influence, there's that flow, that we are in the flow of other people. And so if we are going to change the world, I do believe that it comes at this level, at the small business level, that's saying, yes, I vote for business as a force for good in the world, and I can do my part. And this is what I hear in the heart of business, is like, you're helping people to do their part by stepping into, let's do it differently.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, in this instance, well, I don't know if this gets too wonky, but there's a difference. Like, trade and commerce has been part of humanity for thousands of years, but capitalism has only been around for a few hundred. And capitalism as a structure has brought a lot of toxicity into it, and it has left most people worse off, and it's created tremendous devastation. And I think that what's been successful, education wise, is promoting the myth that trade and commerce is the same as capitalism, and it is not. It is not. And capitalism is when the means, when the assets are privately owned and controlled, not by the people who are actually doing the work. And so when you have tiny businesses, people can be much more closely connected, and like, you can do cooperatives, you can do profit sharing, you can do all these different ways for people to be really directly related to it. And it's, anyway, this is a much larger conversation. I probably shouldn't open that can of worms, but
this is right on.
But it's
I have
really
a question with
important.
this.
Yes, but it's really important to understand that capitalism is not healthy for the planet, and we can see that. We can see the results.
I don't think it's healthy in a way of a mindset too. I work with a lot of clients who, when I talk to them, I say, "Have you ever considered opening up your own business?" And there's usually a couple different views of this, of why they're not opening their own business. One is they're like, "Oh no, I love what I do, and as my hobby. And if I made it into a business, then it would control me. It wouldn't be fun anymore."
Mhm.
And I think that's what you're saying is about the capitalism, because we have such this toxic view around capitalism. They've neuroassociated doing what they love and making a difference in this world is not in the same as capitalism, which it isn't. But they think that if they actually do any kind of business, that it's going to be some sort of capitalist sort of thing, and they lose themselves, so to speak.
Well, I would actually add to that because I don't think that that's wrong. I think you're right
Yeah.
with that. And in addition to that, um, capitalism, at least here in the U.S. As well, but in other countries as well, life has been made so much more difficult. You know, that it a lot of people struggle to survive financially. And to take that pressure into something that somebody has joy about, I don't think it's just a mindset thing. I think there's a very legitimate fear of like, oh, how do I meet the pressure of paying for groceries and paying the mortgage
Right.
and paying, and caring for family or caring for loved ones or just caring for self, um, and uh, and not lose the
Your
joy.
security, your
Yeah,
security and the joy, like how do you
yeah,
integrate the two of them together? I find that that's one, like, that I don't know how to do this. I don't know
right,
how to live if
right,
I actually shifted from leaving my
right,
job and doing something that really brings me joy. How do I live in my foundational needs? I think
right.
there's that. And then I think there's also the pressure, the other types of individuals I've talked to too, that they get the pressure that, hey, they are doing well in their small business and they're getting, they
Hmm.
have sufficient needs met and everything. And then there's the pressure from the outside of saying, oh, well, you should franchise this, or you should open up another
Yeah,
location, and you should do this and
yeah,
add more people and da 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 da. And they're like, no, that's too much to me too. Like, I'm doing great. And I think
right.
like those two are the opposite sort of like,
It's
how do
true.
I
It's
integrate
true.
all that? Yeah. And I think that's something that you bring to light with those that you work with. Is that right? Like how to kind of
Yes.
structure some
Well,
things
well,
like
it's interesting because the model that we work off is there's 4 stages of business development, and the first 3 stages are absolutely necessary, and they're kind of geared to the micro-sized business. Either solo or there's a small handful of people involved, and getting into momentum where the business is just functioning well and everybody's getting paid and it's working and you're enjoying it. Um, that is you have to get there if you're going to make the business work. The fourth stage, which I call independence, is when you're really becoming a quote unquote CEO and you're developing enough of a team that the business can do its thing without you.
Mm.
Which is what, whether you're franchising or what, it's like it's a
that?
larger business operation. And most people have been um, taught, led to believe that in order to get the kind of financial freedom or schedule freedom or what have you, or just what some people call success out of a business, you have to go into that fourth stage. And it's not true. It's absolutely not true. Whenever somebody says, "Oh, I want to go there," I always push back hard and take them through a whole kind of questionnaire and assessment and like really like question because most people just want a really well-running third stage business that gives them the vacation, that gives them plenty of pay, that gets them to do what they enjoy. That next business requires so much more. There's a whole new set of skills that you have to learn. There's a whole intense payroll that you have to take on. And there's a good deal of cash flow and fun, money. Just you need resources, and it's very easy to stumble at that stage and get buried. And unless you really make the jump in a significant way, many people end up making as much or less for themselves from a stage 4 business as they would from a well-running stage 3 business. And they go, I'm working all this hard and did all that work and I'm
And why?
not even getting the financial reward.
Right.
Now, some people do go on and do really well with that, but it's like you have to, you talked about, ballroom teaching, ballroom dancing. Like you have to enjoy the process of developing that stage of a business. You have to want to do that. You can't kind of do it incidentally.
Mm.
And it just takes a lot. And for the right people, it can be really joyous. I'm not saying it's inherently wrong thing. I'm just saying that it's not it shouldn't ever be an automatic goal. It takes a lot of discernment and contemplation. And if you can get your business to stage 3, I often recommend people coasting there for a while and really taking in the enjoyment of it. And if they are thinking about stage 4, save up your money so you have the resources, to be able to make that
Mhm.
leap.
I think too, like what you're saying, it's like it isn't always what you think it is.
Mm.
Mhm.
And so to really have someone who can ask you good questions from the heart, from the soul of like, why do you want to take it bigger? Why do you not want to put your art or your beauty out there to share with others? What are the obstacles so that it comes more from, instead of a reaction aspect, it comes more from a place of evolution and growth and service and, yeah, like you said, the act of love
Yes.
towards yourself, love towards others. And I know myself I always said, when I try to make something happen, it never happens. It just, because there's an angst that comes from within me and there's an attachment, and I'm not listening. I'm not listening to my own self. I'm not listening to someone else. And people get that. People like, but when I totally let go and I come back into why do I do what I do, and what is it that matters to me? And then I let go. And it's like that saying in the 12-step programs, right? Let go, let God. It's like I let go, let God. That doesn't mean I'm not caring about it. That's not means that I'm not paying attention. It just means that I'm allowing spirit or guidance to come in to be with me as my partner. And it shows up differently.
It does. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
One of the themes that I keep hearing throughout the conversation is that when we're moving towards something, it's much more empowering and powerful and healing. You mentioned healing. Every act of business can be a way of healing. And the other thing, like, kind of the counterpart to that is that when we're triggered, whether it's through our advertising or our, whatever, and we're not emotionally regulated. And so we end up reacting, meaning moving away from, like, reactionary mode rather than a towards mode. And I, I love that, because one of the things, I guess, when I think about the heart of business and what you're bringing to the table, I see it as when you get to know your heart, you're moving towards something. You're moving towards your passion, towards your beauty, towards your healing, towards what you came to the planet to be in service to. And to know that there are people like you out there that are doing this, that are helping businesses to step into that with the questions, with the framework, with all of the tools that you bring to the table and your background, it just excites the crap out of me.
Thank you. Inshallah.
Yeah. So as we finish up, what I would love to know is, when you're looking at, one of the things that Stephanie and I often talk about with leadership is that leaders, we become who we want the people around us to be. I know that sounds like a strange sentence. And if I am, they say with teachers, we often teach what we need to learn the most. And so when we're working with ourselves, is there something that you do for yourself or with yourself, a practice that you have that you'd be willing to share that allows you to keep growing into the person that you want to become, the leader you want to become, so that you can then be the example for those that you're leading?
It's a big question.
Nothing like ending on like, a tiny note, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my spiritual practice has multiple practices in it, and so I don't want to overwhelm or, sketch all of that out.
And you
But
don't
there's
need to share the actual practice, just like,
well, I guess so. There's two things I want to say in response. One is that I think that, and I don't think you meant it this way, but I think that there's, because you didn't say the practice, you said a practice. But I think what happens for a lot of us is we can be very reductionist and we're looking for like the thing that's going to do it. And what I've noticed, we also love gardening. We're trying to help create a food forest on the property that we're on, and we do a lot of gardening. And I planted a whole bunch of nut trees and fruit trees. Anyway, for a plant to grow, it needs a lot of things. It needs a whole community around it. It needs the soil. It needs the nutrients. There's not just one thing that it needs. It needs so much. But with a really supportive environment, it grows on its own. It just does its thing. Like, you don't have to make it grow. And so I think that if we like, for us to remember, for each of us to remember, like, oh, it's okay. Like, we have many legitimate needs, and it's okay to be aware of them and to care for them and to get them met. So that's one thing. The second thing that I want to say is that I think like there is kind of like at the heart of a lot of the practices I do, there's this, I've come to understand that one of the most important capacities that a human being can develop is the ability, the willingness to be uncomfortable emotionally without needing to fix or soothe immediately. And there's a question that we like to ask clients and ourselves in these moments, which is love available even here? And so if I'm in some kind of a reactive state, or I'm just, I don't know, I'm just feeling messed up, man. The other day I was like feeling so off. It was just like off. And I'm like, what if I didn't have to not feel off? What if is love available even here in the state of offness? And there's just, God, just saying that, I just feel the space come in. I can take a breath. And it didn't even necessarily change the mood. Like, I was still felt off, but that wasn't the point. The point was that there was spaciousness, that there was acceptance, that I didn't feel so tight or cramped or twisted around it. It's like, oh, what's here? And I find that is what helps expand my container and my ability to be with many, many different types of clients or situations without being as reactive. And I really cherish that practice.
I think that is such a beautiful practice, because when we go back to the reaction, so many of us, when we feel that emotion, we either want to fix it, get away from, so we either push it away, or we dive deeper into it and try to mess it up even more, or we literally freeze like deer stuck in a headlight. And what I heard you say is that you made space. Like, is there love here? Is there love in this moment? It didn't change the mood, but it created a safety space for you to be with what is.
Yeah, I'm
That
no longer alone in that feeling.
exactly. And that it's okay. And it's like that saying, this too shall pass. Like, if I can just be with this, it too will move through, like the weather patterns.
Yeah.
And that's kindness. To me, that's so kind to yourself. And I think that's what I'm hearing too, is the leader that you are, just in the very beginning that you said, instead of like pushing people, like letting them get off the phone and go talk to their loved ones about an opportunity, if it's an opportunity for them, and giving them that space so that they can show up in their heart according to their guidance, not someone else pushing onto it their agenda.
Exactly. We had a new employee come on, I guess 2 years now. People don't tend to, luckily people stick around. We had somebody retire. She wanted to be with her grandkids. Go figure. And we had to replace her. And what we did was I waited until this employee made her first mistake. And then we celebrated. I said, oh, you made your first mistake. Yes. That's what we're waiting for. We all make mistakes, and just actually celebrated the mistake. And made her feel really accepted and made her feel really like, just explain that, I want people to, we of course don't want people to make mistakes on purpose or through sloppiness, but everybody makes mistakes. And I would much rather someone feel empowered to try something and to act and to know that they're not going to be punished for their mistakes than to be doing their job or doing whatever it is they do, trying to avoid mistakes rather than trying to do, rather than trying to be effective or trying to be creative or trying to, so.
And we learn so much from those mistakes.
Yes.
We learn and grow, not just individually, but as a team.
Yes, exactly.
I think we could go into a whole nother podcast just with that. It's fun because Stephanie and I actually did a podcast late last year. It was called Missed Takes or Mistakes. And so, yeah, pulling apart words, we like doing that too. Anyway, we have absolutely totally enjoyed speaking with you, and I know our listeners will want to contact you. So if they were interested in contacting you, possibly work with you, or tell us a little bit. I think you have a book that you wrote. Tell us a little bit about your book, how to reach you, things you've got going on.
If I was savvy, I'd have the book right here, right? So I'll grab it. Anyway, a nice, easy way to connect without being too committed. Heart-centered business, healing from toxic business so your small business can thrive. There's a lot in here that's both healing and also very practical. I've just heard from somebody who said, this is the only business advice that's really stuck with me and worked, and so I just, and so there's the book. You can find us at heartofbusiness.com. The thing I always recommend is just get on our email list, and you'll know after the first few emails that come to you that kind of explain where we're coming from and give you some insights about how business works in some very practical ways. And then every Wednesday we send out something else, that's tends to be a combination of spiritual and aware and very practical. And you'll know, pretty soon whether what we do resonates. And then if there's something you want to do with us, if you want to take a course, if you want to get more personal support, if you want to join our learning community, there's other options, but there's plenty of free stuff, and it's best to kind of, check it out first and see if it resonates.
Love that. Well, thank you so much. Stephanie, did you look like you
I
want
was
to
just
say
to say
something?
thank you. Thank you so much, Mark. It's been absolutely a delight talking to you. And I love that. I just have loved this time, and it's changed a lot within myself and how I've seen things and possibilities. So
That's beautiful.
So wonderful. And may your book and all that you do, I love that it's healing, because it's the world is what's so needing it right now. So thank you so much for taking that time.
Thank you so much. And thank you both for the space that you all hold. This has been a beautiful conversation. I feel very held, and, I just appreciate the two of you.
Thanks. And as a reminder to all of our listeners, if you're driving, don't worry about it. You can find everything and links to Mark and his website and his book in our show notes. So thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time on the Soulful Leader podcast.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.